So you probably noticed that most people have a default automatic way of being in the world. We could simplify it and say there might even be three styles. There's a people oriented style where we try to be likable and get along with people. There's a task oriented style where we try to get results, we try to achieve, we try to win. And then maybe there's a third style in the middle where it's a little more aloof, a little more distant, a little more intellectual. So, whatever your styles and your default is, this has become a habit over time. And it's not something you think about. It's not sort of a wardrobe you put on in the morning. It's just automatic. It's how you show up in the world. You might think of it as your character. So each of these styles has their strengths and also has some of their weaknesses. And if you're here watching this now, I'm guessing that you probably have noticed that there are some side effects to showing up in the world in a certain way. I want to talk a little bit about the three styles and how two of those were mine that I had to work through. And one of them, Dan, has really exemplified and has worked through. But most importantly, I want to talk about how we might do that. And we've got very exciting technology that we want to share with you to help you take advantage of that coming up soon. So for me, one of the first patterns that I came into adulthood with was this likability pattern. I don't know exactly when I chose that this was going to be my thing, but I did. And so I was a little bit of a teacher's pet. I tried to be very open. I tried to be warm. I tried to be nice. When it came to conflict, I would be submissive. And so I think I got taken advantage of a few times, and I wasn't that great at negotiating. And one of the other problems of being so other oriented and do others like me or not is that I kind of lost track of myself. And I distinctly remember in my late 20s when I was complaining to somebody about my job and I didn't really like it that much. And they said, "Well, what do you want, Ono?" And it was crickets inside. I had no idea what I actually wanted. I was so oriented towards others that muscle had so atrophied. To balance this pleasing side, I also had that achiever side. Very competitive, especially when I played in sports. Wanted to do that in an intense way and try to get to as high a level I can and try to get the best score. There's a perfectionism that's sort of baked into that for anyone who knows athletes. You've got to repeat the same thing over and over and over again and try to get perfect at it. And then in my career, I started in engineering, but then I ended up in sales, one of the most achievement oriented careers where there is a real scoreboard as well. So I was traveling a lot, going from trade show to trade show, and salespeople turn time into money. So at any moment of time, I could be trying to turn that into money. So I was writing proposals late at night. We went on a family trip to Europe, and I brought my computer with me, and I was doing proposals in the back room when really I should have been hanging out with family. So that pattern kind of worked because I got some results. But then it wasn't until my daughter was on the way that I realized I got to slow down a little bit. I can't be gone all the time. I can't be cranking all the time. I'm going to miss her first steps. I'm going to miss her first words. So I really put in some good work to try to get over that pattern. So those are two of the patterns. The third one is the super intellectual pattern. I think my colleague Dan tell the story well of how he exemplified that in his youth. I forget all the details, but I think he was 12 years old and already doing high school level work. One of those people piling up advanced degrees and then joining companies and finding he was pretty quickly the smartest person in the room and then letting everybody know that. And so there's a sort of critical strategy of, I'll prove that I'm the smartest by poking six holes in your idea that came out. He'd learned to soften that over time. But for him, it was, he didn't want to be that kind of person, wasn't in alignment with who he wanted to be. So might there be a way to be smart and also still help others instead of constantly squishing them down? So I'll let him tell the story of how he got over that. It's actually kind of funny in parts. But I wanted to get to the main course here, which is how. How might you change these kinds of things? And I wanted to provide just a little evidence first that it is possible to evolve out of these behavior loops. And so let's talk about them briefly. So we can think about them as loops, actually. And there's something about this loop metaphor that I like that seems to be appropriate here. There's a stimulus, and then we have a response, and then we get a certain result, and then that reinforces the pattern because we get a certain result. Okay, I got the result. Well, then let me do it again. Let me do it again. And sometimes there are a couple different loops that are interacting. So I go into one loop, and then if that doesn't work, I go into a second loop, and then I maybe bounce back to the next loop. So for me, it felt a bit like being in a washing machine and just being a little bit out of control, going around and around. And how am I going to stop this washing machine from the inside? Well, that's our first clue, is that you don't. You can't do it from the inside. You have to step back from this thing. So what we're going to teach you a little bit in this webinar and definitely in the workshop is how to map one of these behavior loops. And it's important to get all the important ingredients in there. So there's the beliefs that you have, there's the strategies that you have, there are the needs that you have, and these are all custom and different for each of us. Then there's actions that you take, and then there's a reason that the whole thing is self-sealing, and you're keeping it a little bit in your shadow. So I'm using a lot of terms here. It takes longer to do this, hours to do it really. But once you can map this whole behavior loop out, now you can get a little bit of distance from it. And now you can imagine you're standing in front of the washing machine instead of being in the washing machine. And from that place, there's this beautiful moment of agency where you realize, I see now how my whole paradigm works. I see that I actually helped create that paradigm in response to whatever situations I was in. If I created that paradigm, I could create a new paradigm as well, a new way of being, a new behavior loop and pattern. And so that's what we're going to help you do, is to zoom out, step back, map the old one, and then map the new one, and then step in to the new one. And we're not talking about something simple like a habits change, like an atomic habits or something like that. Some good stuff in there, and it works for some changes. But we're looking at changes that require more of a root cause and an understanding of the root cause, and maybe taking out some of those roots with it. So what we like about this approach is that you get to take the entire paradigm, and that makes it a more sustainable change. In the old way, we can interfere in some of the strategies and actions, maybe design in some new behavioral hacks. If you read a book like Atomic Habits, great book, will give you some sort of topical treatment for that in a way. They do talk about being, and that's important. But from our point of view, it doesn't quite get all the way down to the roots. And if you've ever had bamboo on your property or ivy on your property, you can chop that off and things look different for a little while. But if the roots are still there, the thing still grows back. And it doesn't take that long. Unfortunately, we wish it would stay away longer. So that's what we want, an enduring behavior change for you here, where even if your pattern was lifelong, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you were doing the pleasing thing or you were doing the achieving thing, to be able to really step back from that and have a moment of wisdom to design a new paradigm. That's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about it in our webinar on October 11th. So please do come join us for that. And then there, you will learn everything you need to see if this 2-day workshop on November 3rd and 4th is right for you and if you're ready for it. Because this can be a huge life-altering step towards showing up in a new way without some of those side effects and some of those cracks that you might have been noticing so far. So that's what we're inviting you into. Please read more on the page, sign up for the webinar, and we'll see you there.